Hi, I'm Micaiah Stevens, or McCaven. This is a video response to Kryzarel. I'm sure I butchered that a few months ago. Yeah, I don't know. 7 months ago, at least. Did this really awesome inventory system. I've worked with several of them, tutorials, and then he upped it with a crafting system. So a couple weeks ago when he put out the new crafting system, I decided to come out with my own project here. So let's get started. Oh, I guess I should have. Anyways, a couple things to note. You'll probably see very similarities. Um, Here's the users. You've got. I just thought, hey, I always do scroll views for everything just in case. Anyway, so you've got the same sort of inventory here. You've got the items or equipment, and then you've got inventory. I just decided that to add 180 stacks for just for fun. Anyways, and then you can see I've got my own implementation of his inventory crafting system here. I'm not using any sprites because it's harder to link for me to link the sprite system into the inventory system quite yet. Mostly it's because it's working out the how to differentiate all the sprites and stuff. Anyways, so I just thought this is plus I also like text fallbacks. So it's basically this very similar to what he was doing. Everything's sort of the same. Um, for instance, the player stats and all this is just everything he worked on. It works with his code, as we'll see in a few minutes here. I do have a working experience system and combat system in various games, so but I'm kind of trying to focus on this aspect of it. Some other cool things I added is the ability to show what's only craftable. So anyways, and then I've added these numbering system that he sort of had in place. And then this is just his little indicator that, so 3 iron makes 1 iron ingot. You just click craft. It's not really intuitive right now. Plus I hate the fact that, you can't even see that's a button because it's so anyways, and then the other thing I might want to try to figure out for myself is how to figure out how to, when you click craft another item, like the handle forging comes up, and that, you know, uh, makes it hard. So anyways, so we're just going through. I've got item stacking working, so we have 17 iron ore. You click craft, and now you have 14. And then we could just, whoa, yep, oh, and there it goes. And then so now we build a blade, which is 2, and a handle. Oh, I already built one. And then we can do an iron smithing, which creates us an iron sword. And then I've implemented his, so this is all his systems here. So he's got this iron sword. I've just named it from the main hand. I'm probably going to use shields, and then this randomly generated the stats, intelligence, or randomly generated all the stats. You can right click. You can't drag and drop for some reason. I just probably didn't hook that up correctly. But you can right click and you see your vitality is increasing by 2 because of that. So that's cool. So then we can also do wheat seeds into stock right here. Oh yeah, so I have water and yeast as well. And then you can take your stock and mill it into flour. This is kind of, and then you can make dough out of it, and then you can make bread. The stacking system, I should mention as well. I think ingredients stack up to 10. Iron stack, there's various things like wheat stacks up to 50 or something. Just depends on what item it is. Bread only stacks up to 5, for instance. See if I can do that. Yeah, see, I want to be able to, if you're clicking on something that's on focus, I want it to be able to stay in place. But anyways, and then so then you can create some dough. It's all really basic right now, but yeah, so bread stacks up to 5 right here. So yeah, so that's pretty much kind of what the main demo of the project here. This is a lot of sort of ideas. Wheat kernel is kind of like you take this is kind of you take the stock and you can make wheat seeds. I always thought that was a good idea because it sort of comes realistic. One of the things I wanted to talk about is some of the code a little bit. Probably not going to show all case of it. Kryzrel wanted to get a hold of me and ask him how to do a certain thing. That would be pretty cool because I I'm probably going to use this in a lot of projects here coming forward. Anyway, so I wanted to set this up all in code. There's no data. There's very little data. Let's see. I don't think there's any data we pull. Yeah, there's no data in. I believe in in the actual scriptable file. So it all handles through this kinds. There's planting, gathering, ingredients, and products, and then we've got these item types, and then these ingredients. So that's where you get the ingot, blade, handle, seed, all this various stuff. And you've got a product, which is where you so, and then technology. We haven't implemented technology, but that's sort of the idea here. And then so this is the general idea. It's like an item controller, but it's more like the item database. And to create an item scriptable object, it just says, hey, I want to create a wheat planting, and then the wheat planting, I believe, goes through here. I guess it's okay. So we go through here and say, so we switch on the type, which is wheat, and then we come through here and say, well, if it's wheat and it's planting, that's wheat seed, wheat stalk, and wheat flour, and those are sort of grouped together. And then same with iron, that we have iron that goes into ingots and or from ore to ingots. So gathering, I thought gathering and actually stock are sort of like they're the surface level, and plant. This actually used to be called surface. Well, it used to plants or whatever, but then actually it's funny because this is plants because the stalk, the wheat stalk is the wheat that's standing up, standing wheat. It's actually funny because that is actually a plant, but planting is when you plant the seed. Anyway, so that became much more like this is like and it also this was like a subsurface and this was a surface. But anyways, it became much easier to say this is something you plant, like seeding or something. But planting, I guess, works out. So it's like, and then too, this is also like barley, barley, watermelons, whatever. We have a watermelon sprite, that's why. Carrots, those are all going to fall under this seed category. So basically, you have seeds, even if it's not true per se. You have seeds, and they go into the ground, and then they come out with, this would be barley stalk, watermelon stalk, and carrot stalks, and then you get barley flour, watermelon flour, and carrot flour. It'll probably work out differently, and then the same way for iron. So we have, steel, bronze, copper, whatever you want here, gold, silver, and platinum or something. Then would be the iron tarts, and then you'll have steel ore, and as various stuff like that. Let's see. So then we go through, through the create item here, and we just say, hey, like iron's actually interesting. So we got an iron ore, and then it's iron ingredient, which should be iron ingot, and then we have an iron ingredient, but it's a blade. They're considered ingredients, and then they have this little subclass of. So we have iron. I believe it's iron handle at that point. Iron blade is what it uses, and then we have an iron product, which is an iron product is actually not a sword. It's sort of the idea is maybe it's a crate or uh, some sort of packaged good, but an iron product that is, and then we type in through the kind as the product, and then we tack on and say, hey, it's a sword, and then we take this sword. Let's see, what's the best? I think that's under the crafting recipe. I thought that this was kind of I guess maybe it's a little too much to show, but anyways, this is kind of the idea that I had here, where it's kind of, you can see where here's his equipable item. We create the instance, even though our result is an item display, which is just an item with an amount, which is what he does. But then we take this equipable item as a scriptable object, and then we use this copy constructor, which just basically says, what I kind of want to do is just say e item equals equipable item. Item of craft item would be in this case, which is actually valid code, but then it gets into here and says, hey, I don't know how to convert this to here, which is kind of, I think, dumb, because this is equipable item is an item, So it should just be able to upconvert, filling in the data that it has, which is what I wanted to do, and which is what this copy construct. I think Quill kind of talked about this. I showed me this idea in a tutorial about how the fact that it's kind of like a deep copy of the information. So we're basically copying all the information from this item onto this thing, which it should be able to do it automatically. Maybe that's what you can do in an implicit conversions, stuff like that. Anyways, the copy pulls out the data that it needs. It's an iron sword, for instance, but then we find, hey, we get this random strength, the stat system on top of it, and then we say, hey, if it's a product type of sword, then we associate that with the main hand for the equipment type, and then and then we, if it's not, we just instantiate the. So if it's an iron ingot, we just instantiate the craft item. Sorry about that. Tickle in the throat. Anyways, so that's pretty much it. So we added quite a few systems. He probably, a lot of this is already in place. Like his accounts and stacking was all sort of there. We just sort of formalized what it was doing. Um, and then the crafting is actually pretty cool too, where it's sort of not as, I call it self-replicating. I want the item to sort of say, create the item, and then and it stores all the craft information on the item to sort of keep it succinct. But I kind of want it to sort of, recognize, like, that's what I'm trying to teach it. Teach the computer that a seed goes into the ground and you get some sort of a plant out of it or something like that. But it's working out pretty good so far, and I think the system can be expanded. You can also show all the recipes here. I don't think there isn't anything. We're sort of just trying to keep these sort of two examples because they're pretty good examples from the thing. And the other thing too, I noticed too as well. One of the things, maybe it's a little secreted to this, is that I realized that in trying to say, hey, I have a seed which goes into a plant, which goes into flour, which goes into dough, into bread. That's like a chain of events any kid can understand, but a computer has no idea what it's talking about. So then I came up with this idea that what a human knows is they're associating all that stuff with some sort of type of ingredient, such as wheat in this case. That maybe even we think about, maybe in America we'd say wheat, but in Africa you'd say barley or rice, or in Japan, or there's people have a general consensus for what these things are, but for me, I think of wheat because it's like wheat farmers of America or whatever, but not that it really matters, but it's sort of, then we say it's a wheat seed. We know that already, but the computer doesn't. So now we know it's a wheat seed, it's a wheat plant, it's a wheat flour, it's a wheat dough, it's a wheat bread. And then we have this chain that knows every single type is the same thing, and then it can use them all the same. And at some point, the system will say, hey, all I need is flour, and then it will say, I don't care if it's wheat flour, barley flour, corn flour, whatever, as long as it's flour. Is my goal. So you'll take water, any type of water too, and then you'll say, hey, maybe not brackish water or dirty water, but right now it's asking for wheat flour, but in the future, all it really needs to say, I think I set this up specifically so I can notice it, but in the future, I have it sort of this idea where I just say, hey, I want flour and water, and then I can make, so if I have, wheat flour, which we don't have any, of course, wheat flour or, barley flour or corn flour, then we can just implement that into this, and then you could sort of say, like Graveyard Keeper has this little up arrows and down arrows where you can select what type. I think that's kind of frustrating for, to try to cycle through 15 types like that, but anyway, so that's kind of the general idea of what I'm going with this. And then I'm going to implement. One of the next things I was talking about too is that this character is linked to this equipment panel, which is linked to this inventory, and this inventory is linked to these items. So eventually, I want some sort of like, maybe right here I can put a left and right arrow key where I can select, each, like in an RTS or an RPG game, where you can select every single NPC or whatever and see what they're doing, which I thought would be a really good system to say, this person with this experience and these stats, and then we click the next person. Now we'll see John Stevens with his experience and stats, and then Mary, and then Mark, and all these scenes will have um, each of their characters be able to, and then they'll populate their inventory and their equipment, and all this stuff will recognize that we've changed the character. I've kind of been thinking about that system because that's sort of what I get sort of boggled down in this idea of I want to separate out all this stuff so it doesn't care. It just needs to know who am I looking at, and then also say, hey, who I'm looking at is changed into this other person, so I need to refresh all my everything that's associated with that. So like the inventory says, hey, that's what it's doing now. This inventory is looking at a character scriptable object, and this equipment is looking at the character. I think it's through the character or through a separate. I think this is actually an inventory, and this is an inventory, and these are actually these actually slots are actually they're part of an inventory slot. It's a slot handler. So this system, and this system all are the same system. It just needs to say now, hey, I need to look at this character. I mean, this is actually this is a craft slot, this is an equipment slot, and this is an item slot. But then they all handle the slot. But then in the subclass of that, each of those have a. I'm not sure if the craft slots actually have, but the crafting. Oh no! You know what it is? The crafting recipe window right here has a Kryzrel. Kryzrel should probably well knows his code, but he actually has this tied to an inventory, which I've sort of. This is actually a game object right here, which is associated with an inventory scriptable object. I've separated that out, but so that inventory scriptable object sits right on here. So if I switch out this character's inventory, then they send their inventory over to here, and then it should repopulate. Anyways, that's the next goal. Sorry, this is getting quite long, but I think it's really cool. There's a few things I'd like to try to figure out, like why can I think it's just I didn't add in the linking the actions, and then stuff like that. I do actually like his implementation of his drag system here. This is actually, this is the item here, and then you drag out, and this right here on my mouse is an image, and then I've just applied a Text Mesh Pro to it, poorly apparently. But it's hard to get those dual lines working. Especially you can see like here, it's a dough ingredient is so much smaller than a iron handle. But anyways, I'm sure we'll have to figure that out at some point. Um, thanks very much. I appreciate it. It's just kind of showcasing what I'm doing with this, so it's really cool. This is kind of the latest. It's a little bit probably ahead of the YouTube series, but hopefully he'll get that caught up because I pulled it from the GitHub. But because I worked with all this in a separate project, and I was like, well, I just need to get this up and running, and then hopefully I'll dump in my experience system or something, and I've got a much bigger stat system and stuff like that. But I mean, he's kind of taken the base of what he's done and then added on my sort of layers of experience. Anyways, thanks very much. You have a great day, and we'll see you next time.